A few months ago, I was reading through a Goldman Sachs commodity report at an unreasonable hour of the night, and I came across a price target that made me put my coffee down. $6,000 an ounce. Not buried in a footnote. Not hedged with a dozen qualifiers. A serious target with a serious timeline. But it was not the number that stopped me. It was the 3 specific conditions Goldman flagged as most likely to get gold there. One of them I expected. One of them surprised me. And one of them I am still thinking about. That report is what made me add to my position twice in the following 18 months, and I want to walk you through exactly why. Before I get into those 3 conditions, I want to say something that reframes the entire conversation. The number is almost beside the point. What matters is which road gets you there, because each one describes a completely different world. And one of those roads arrives faster than almost anyone is positioned for. I will get to that one last. I started buying gold for boring reasons. Inflation protection, diversification, the standard pitch. My wife was supportive in the way people are supportive of things they do not fully understand but are not alarmed by. That changed slightly when I started spending weekend mornings reading central bank reserve data instead of doing normal things. The thesis was shifting and the research kept pointing toward the same conclusion from different directions. What I did not expect was how far down that road the evidence actually went. The first condition Goldman flagged was sustained central bank buying, and on the surface it sounds like the boring one. It is not. China, India, Poland, Turkey, and a growing list of others have been accumulating gold at a pace not seen in decades. But here is the detail that changed how I thought about it. These are not investors reacting to a price chart. A central bank does not panic sell at 2 a.m. because it read something alarming on the internet. It operates on decade-long time horizons, and when an institution that size commits to a direction, it stays committed through corrections, through sideways markets, through everything. Every ton that moves into a government vault is a ton permanently removed from available supply. That kind of buying does not produce a dramatic spike. It produces a floor that keeps moving higher whether the headlines are paying attention or not. And what is driving that buying at an institutional level connects directly to the second condition. February 2022 was the moment that changed this conversation permanently. When roughly $300 billion in Russian foreign reserves got frozen overnight, every finance minister in every country not firmly inside the Western Alliance watched it happen and quietly asked the same question. How much of our wealth is sitting in assets that can disappear with a phone call? Gold cannot be frozen. It cannot be sanctioned. It does not have a counterparty that can decide one morning to make it inaccessible. That lesson got learned publicly and loudly, and the reserve buying that followed was not a coincidence. If de-dollarization accelerates, and the data suggests it already is, the demand picture shifts in a way that makes $6,000 look conservative. This was the condition in the Goldman report that surprised me most. Not because the idea was new, but because of how explicitly an institution like that was willing to name it as a primary price driver. That felt like something crossing from fringe to mainstream in real time. I want to be honest about where I was mentally when I started taking all of this seriously. It felt like a rabbit hole that ended with people who also owned a lot of freeze-dried food. I told my wife I was doing research, and she gave me a look I have come to recognize as her monitoring the situation face. But the more primary sources I read, actual reserve data, actual policy statements, actual trade agreements being structured outside the dollar system, the less fringe it felt. This was already happening. It just had not made the mainstream news cycle in a way that made normal investors pay attention yet. That gap between what is actually occurring and what most people are positioned for is where I think the real story sits. And it makes the third condition the most important one to understand. A systemic financial shock. The kind that does not just move markets but shakes confidence in institutions broadly. Gold does not gradually drift higher in a real crisis. It moves fast and it moves hard. This is the scenario where you wake up and gold is up $400 in a single session, and the number on your screen is genuinely the least interesting thing happening in the world that week. This was the condition I expected to see in the report, but what surprised me was how Goldman framed it. Not as the primary scenario, as the accelerant. The thing that could collapse a years-long move into months. If $6,000 arrives this way, nobody is celebrating. The gold is doing its job, but the job it was hired for is not a fun one. So what do the three conditions actually mean when you lay them out together? Road 1 is already in motion and building. Road 2 is accelerating in ways that are showing up in real data right now. Road 3 is the wild card that could make the timeline irrelevant. None of this requires believing anything conspiratorial. It just requires looking at what is already happening and following it forward honestly. If Road 1 plays out, your gold position did well, other assets probably did reasonably well too, and your brother-in-law who called gold a relic has gone suspiciously quiet at family dinners. If Road 2 accelerates, the decisions you made years earlier start looking less like caution and more like foresight. If Road 3 arrives first, you are not thinking about your portfolio. You are thinking about everything else. I added to my position twice in the last 18 months. Not because I am certain about any specific number. Because I read a report that laid out three conditions clearly, looked at the evidence behind each one, and could not find an honest reason to argue with the direction. That is a different thing than chasing a price target, and it is a more comfortable place to hold from when things get volatile. What would gold at $6,000 change about how you think about your own finances? Drop it in the comments. And if something specific shifted your thinking on gold recently, I genuinely want to hear what it was.